because I don't feel like none of that. What y'all saying ain't got nothing to do with me. So I learned at an early age to have a thick skin. So once I got a thick skin, I understood what's called a universal right to express yourself. That means that everybody don't have to agree with me. They ain't supposed to. If everybody agreed with me, that means it should be over instantly. So we got to have opposition.
Right.
Because it has to be a process at play where overcoming the opposition brings harmony and balance to the collective. And the only way to do that is to go through a struggle with the people out in the open in the public domain. And social media has become the universal method of communicating around the world. We can get on Facebook and Instagram and do a video that reach people in China, Japan, and in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Where years ago, we didn't have the option when Malcolm X was around and Du Bois and Medgar Evers. They didn't have the option to have the internet and to stay in the safety of their home while they tell the people what's really going on.
Right, they couldn't.
The ones who used to try to figure the problem out, instead of going out in the streets marching, I ain't finna do that. Not for my own shit. I'm not finna be out here buck dancing for these people. Not for my own shit. And Mama had to leave me a means to find what's rightfully ours and how to recover it. And one of the things she kept saying to me was always look for the wisdom, right? And so understanding that, I searched through the minds of great thinkers in order to find out what is this stuff they call wisdom, because if I can't buy it in a bottle, I got to find it somewhere. I'm thinking this as a child. So if I can't find it in a bottle, where am I find it at? Right? So the discovery comes in is you find the wisdom at the feet of the masters, right? The first master is Mama. So starting from Mama, who says the stuff that gives you the best result when applied to life? And this, as a child, made me pay attention to the elder women. And the elder women was the ones, especially the ones that talk harsh and use profanity. We call them big mamas. They harvest the energy of Prime Creator in order to be guides to the family. Under the patriarchal system, we've been taught to call them old bitches and don't pay them no attention. And they telling us the solution to all of the world's problems, but we ain't listening as a collective. Some of us do. Some of us know if Mama say don't go down that street, something bad gonna happen, go the other way. Because if you go down that street, you're gonna walk right into the BS. I did it 1,000 times because I learned the hard way every time. And the hard lesson is the lesson that you're gonna learn and gonna internalize the deepest. Because it's gonna hurt the most that you keep going through the same foolishness. But when you wise up, that's gonna become entrenched in you as your biggest lessons, the ones that was hardest to learn. And the hardest lesson to learn was at the feet of the masters is to follow the voice of the women who give wise guidance. And you can tell the difference by the character of the women, right? So when I see you on here complain about them calling Noble Drew Ali a false prophet, some in my soul say you can't just let that go. You got to say something. So I said something. A lot of the Moors is like, what is this thing? Where did he come from? I thought he hated all the Moors. I keep telling them over and over, I'm not anti-Moor, I'm anti-dirty Moor. So I started studying great people because I didn't really know what a master was. But the great people's information, they give references to other great people who turns out to be masters, right? And in our community, each one teach one, we all got to reach something. And if we reach enough, we can spread the information. Now, the land, the Mississippian rule, this is deep culture, organic North America. Any culture that comes on the land, we have to have a significant influence on it through the arts and the entertainment. So we can use these things in the time of crisis to communicate the recovery from the oppression or whatever adverse force overtakes us on the land. Now we have to time the solution in order to correctly end the problem. So in the course of the studies, when you run across Marcus Garvey, Noble Drew Ali, Prince Hall, David Walker, Booker T. Washington, W.E.B. Du Bois, you don't look at them in their conflicts, you look at them in their agreements, right? So they tell us that Du Bois and Garvey don't get along because Garvey is what you call a totalitarian recovery expert. In other words, he come to recover the whole of the original structures from its original source out of the Blue Lodge, where Du Bois comes from a different angle or perspective of view. He said that only a 10%, what we call the talented 10th, will ever do anything of significance to rise to positions of prominence in any society. Therefore, we should focus on isolating that talented 10th and maximizing the input in the bank, right? Now we go from the talented 10th to a 5%er, right? Because all of the talented 10th is not working in the interest of the collective. Most of them is working in their own self-interest. We don't care about that. You can work in your self-interest, but you have to leave an indelible impression that can be read by future generations to leave a blueprint or a pattern to put the puzzle pieces together on how to recover from the condition, right? So the 5%ers teach that 85% of the people blind, deaf, and dumb and don't know what's going on. And 10% of the people know what's going on and they're not doing nothing about it. But there's 5% of the people that know what's going on that's working to raise the other 85% to awareness to overcome the tyranny of the 1% who was extracted from the 10%. So the 1%ers is what they call the people that's ruling the world as elites. Has a system at play, and if we figure out their system, we can reverse engineer the society in order to find out how to get back to our rights and our ability to reclaim the land based on our birthright to the land at the close of the age. Most of us don't know that it's a universal law that we are obligated by universal law, the organics of the world, at the close of every age, no matter what's going on, to shut it all down. Anything that is destructive to the ends of the collective is dispensed with, and anything found to be a benefit is used as a bridge to the next coming age. So now we leave in the age of Pisces, the water age of believing, to the air age of Aquarius. But remember, the Aquarian man carries a pitcher of water that's being spilled. Water is the symbol for spirit. So what it's telling you is we going from spiritually believing stuff with no information to support why we believe it to the mental aspect of spiritually knowing exactly what we see in the Aquarian age. So earlier I was saying about we had to be able to see the signs significantly enough in order to know when to make our move. Now, I came out to do this work when I came home from prison back in 2008. But everybody I went to shut the door in my face. They all said that I ain't have no degrees, I ain't had no alphabets behind my name, therefore I wasn't qualified, right? But not until Farrakhan gave a speech and Khalid Muhammad left, and he said, "You think I didn't need a brilliant mind like Khalid Muhammad?" Well, Khalid, my man, I'm just like that motherfucker, but I think a little deeper, right? Everything he be saying, I feel that way, but it's one problem. He was trying to go against the rules. He was trying to fight the enemy in the physical when it's a spiritual war taking place, right? You can't fight a physical war that's spiritual. You have to fight the spiritual side and let the effects manifest in the physical arena. In this case, we use universal law weaponized to fight tyranny and oppression around the world. And after you go through the dark night of the soul, you begin to see the pattern in which universal laws apply. And this is where me learning the functions, structure, and intricacies of civics and the changing of rulership in past historical contexts in both hostile situations such as a coup d'etat to more amicable transformations such as a king seceding from the throne and another king ascending in his place. There is a civics solution to the problem. Well, the first time I became aware that there was a civics solution to the problem is when Noble Drew Ali said that I started a civics organization. The contradiction that made me raise an eyebrow is ask why are they patterning it now as if it's a religion, right? So that took me back to Albert Pike's The Morals and the Dogma. Because under the civics, there's no dogma involved because you're unraveling the legalese. But if you can get them to chase the dogma, they won't really take the civics serious enough in order to exercise a superior jurisdiction to overthrow the imposters on the land, because the only way you can do it is to go back to your original system. Your original system is a matriarchal system based off the oral decree of the chieftains in agreement across the land, that which benefits the most amount of people from each of the clans.
Wouldn't there be a necessity really to go back to the original system in doing that? Wouldn't there be a necessity of shedding ourselves or divorcing ourselves of all the religious attachments, the dogma that we've taken on to be, Christians and to be, this denomination, that, I mean, from a standpoint of when we realized that those things were actually put in place to put us under subjection. So,
so
would we have to shed those in order to get back to the original?
At this point of the discovery process for the collective, they can use whatever path of spiritual development they choose to, as long as they don't turn a blind eye to the other paths, right? And this is where the polarization comes out, as Noble Drew Ali called it, as a religious controversy. We got to remember, we are allelopathic, and we are naturopathic first, right? That means that all things have to go back to a stasis, which is the state of balance, right? So when you abruptly tell somebody who's been in the church for 75 years, hey, drop that some garbage, the shock to their system could cause a healing crisis to a significant degree to make them lose their mind. If you go back to Elijah Muhammad, he said if you wake them up too soon, you're driving crazy. And that's why he used to keep saying, make it plain enough for a baby to understand it.
So right? What are we trying to get folks that are steeped in any level of dogma to understand? From what where I come from, having been a pastor for 10 years, mm-hmm. and seeing the good and the ugly. You see it all, and in between.
Okay, so let's use.
Yeah, I mean, I'm saying indoctrination, and like you mentioned earlier, 12-step program, and the various, all of these things were things that affects the mind of people. Fear, reverence, so that you don't think outside the box. Having to reverence something that is unseen while ignoring the obvious inside of yourself. All of those things to me have been designed to not allow us to get back to the natural. I mean, you're saying, I know, and I do know what you mean about not waking up folks too soon. I mean, or not all of a sudden. Although for my personal awakening, it hit me like a ton of bricks when I was in a service, and all of a sudden I was snatched out of it in an out of body experience. And the next day, I'm up in the pulpit preaching my swan song, because right after that, everybody's going, because now I'm like you say, crazy. They say about you, I was crazy. But for me, maybe that was the way it had to happen. But for the masses, to get critical mass, and nothing really happens, I don't think, until you get enough minds thinking the same. So in your going through, I want to go back to your dark night of the soul before you get too forward, because you kind of skipped over. You said when I came out of prison in 2008. But what about those years prior to 2008? How about the time when you were, you ended up apparently veering from what Big Mama was saying because you were running off, maybe you were running from your calling. But in that captured, if you will, situation, what happened to you there? What were you doing during those times?
So when I first got caught up and locked up, I remember the voice of the sisters that I used to hear give words of wisdom. I was in Cook County Jail. I was in there. I was like on my second or third day in there, and a bald head guy named Hawk came with a sister. I can't remember her name, and they were actually Christians, but she wasn't coming with the dogma. She was coming with raw common sense. And one of the things she said was that stuck with me. And she said, some of y'all finna get a lot of time. She said, but don't worry about that. You can't stop that. Put yourself in. There is no escape, even if you want to. She said, but the best thing that you can do is don't let them take the time from you. Use the time. Learn everything you can while you in there. You don't need no degree, but get your PhD. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, that makes so much sense. So this, if I apply this to my prison term, if I get time out of this, and I apply what she's saying, when I get out of prison, I can have the knowledge of a professor at a university in the amount of time that I'm about to get, that I don't know I'm about to get this much time. Right? Mm-hmm. And so in the end, they gave me 18 to 50 years in prison. Right? And during my my Cook County stint, well, it was like a year and a half, I end up coming across, I just started realizing that all of the most potent members of our community, the organic indigenous people, was in these cages. Right? And I got introduced by different ones, by different people. Like the leader of the Maniac Disciples, name is Ferg. I met my cousin, introduced me to him on our way to court. Right? Then in the bullpen, it was some BGs, what they call black gangsters, that was high ranking, and he introduced me to them. Right? I had a vice lord introduced me to Willie Lord. And it was kind of odd to me when he done that, because we walking through the day room, he calling me over there where his chief at to introduce me to his chief. But he told me beforehand, he said, man, I want to introduce you to Willie Lord. Right? And I was like, okay. And because we was watching him on the news get arrested. And when he got in there, he was downstairs in a cell block called ABO in Division 1. So he came up on a visit. They brought him up to A1 where I was at. And so Lil J, who was a 4-star elite vice lord, he said, come here, man, I want you to meet somebody. And he walked over, he said, stay right here. So I'm standing on the other side of the day room, and he went and said a couple words to Willie Lord, and he waved me over there. He said, hey, Lord, I want you to meet him, man. And he told me who I was. His name Rod. And back then, I was studying with a Nation of Islam guy named Everett X, who was teaching me about, now this is all within the first year of being locked up. But he was teaching me Nation of Islam doctrine. And they was calling me Rod X. Right? But they was calling me that like a nickname because I hang out with the Nation of Islam guy all the time. But they all knew that I was under the GD banner. And so when he introduced me to Willie Lord, the whole day room stopped talking and they looking. And what he said caught my attention. He said, hey, Lord, this one right here, this the one. I don't know what that shit means. right? And he shook my hand and he says, "It's good to meet you, young brother." He said, "Stay on the straight and narrow." That's all he said. He didn't give me no conversation. We didn't go into nothing. We just greeted each other, but he told me to stay on the straight and narrow. I know what that means from church, and I know what that means from Everett. And we discussed it, right? Staying on the straight and narrow means walk straight, right? Don't let these people push you off your path. Mm-hmm. Now, when Everett X had to leave, he went upstate, and the last thing I told him, I was like, "Man, this is a big deal. I don't know if I could do it." He looked at me, and I could see the Elijah Muhammad in his face when he started smiling. He said, "Oh, you got this." And then he recited the story of Hiram Abiff. And he said, "You're going to need that later." And then I heard Farrakhan go over the story of Hiram Abiff, right? And when I started studying the story, after I got out of prison, I started seeing certain events unfolding that was unnerving to me, because this was starting to tell me there's a Masonic connection to my birthright. So now I have to study the lodges deeper than I already have, because I was going through a secret society investigation while I was studying with the Nuwabians in prison. So I was going through each secret society, reading entire text on them, where Malachi had a book out called Secret Societies Unmasked, where he got a little part about all of them. So I started to get books from their perspective about their doctrine, right? But it became more enhanced when I came home, right? And so during the course of these years, normally my temperament, I would have been, what they call ready to ride. I was always ready to ride, but it had to be one condition. I got to be right. The only reason why I feel like that is because my mama used to tell me when I was little that don't start nothing and you're going to always win it. You got to always be in the right. So I don't start nothing, but I sure finish it. I don't got no problem finishing it. And I remember my father saying that a man always moves straight. He said, "Man, don't do all that funny, swervy, shifty stuff." That's not how he was talking to his friends in our garage. So this was one of my lessons on being a man from my father that really impacted my life, because I always came at people straight. And mama said, respect those who respect you. But you got to give respect to get respect. That means if I'm at your house, in order for me to get respect at your house, I got to first give you respect. I got to come in peace in order to receive peace and the blessing upon arrival. So everywhere I went, I held that in the forefront of my mind. And everybody that I met them from a level of respect, and it was returned. And this is why, as a GD, I'm over in Motown on 50th in May, living in the complex in the All-Stone neighborhood. The only folks is on 50th place, right? So I gave them their respect because that's their land. I already know to honor them on their land and give them their due respect. And they drew an attachment to me from being respectable and being respectful of their place. So I ran into a couple of confrontations with some of the Stones, but it was always resolved in a manner of respect. So I didn't ever have a problem with Stones and Vice Lords being Stones and Vice Lords. I didn't never see them as enemies because I knew we had the same enemies. So I didn't know how to categorize what I'm looking at, but I know that whoever it is that's infiltrating Stones and Vice Lords is the same people infiltrating the GDs. I understand the literature of the GDs, and I understand the literature that I was given by Vice Lords, and I understand the literature that I was given orally by Stones and Crips and Bloods. And I'm seeing a pattern that this is the behavior that's ancient on the land. If this behavior is ancient on the land, I got to see it somewhere else. Here, lo and behold, it emerges. It's the structure of the Nation of Islam. It's the structure of the 5% nation. It's the structure of Yahweh ben Yahweh's Hebrew Israelites. It's a repeating pattern. It's a tribal structure from the top to the bottom. How we used to perform in the old ways where we was in all parts of the land, but we never had conflicts with people on their portion of the land. Because we understood that who we are is predicated up on honoring those in respect when you in their house. You can't come in somebody's house and just superimpose your will. So whoever the imposter is the ones who came in our house and is doing what we don't normally do.
Makes sense.
So when I started tracing it back, I end up with the 32-degree Scottish Rite, Morals and Dogma, George Washington, Albert Pike, the guy that started the Illuminati, Adam Weishaupt. 3 different personas of the same person. But most people can't see the pattern. I couldn't see the pattern originally until I was studying forensic profiling and the mechanics of it. And I wanted to do a forensic profile on the biblical God character, which turned out horrible, by the way. Turned out horrible. Turns out that he's a sociopathic narcissist, early bedwetter, who has mama issues and daddy issues and don't know his own identity and sexuality, who feels that he should be held in superiority to other people just because who he is, where other people become less than him. This biblical God character can't be no God. He got to be some kind of mortal masquerading as a God through written literature. Because that's not the characteristics of the God form. So that came from a Q&A that I had in Saginaw Correctional Facility with some University of Michigan psychologists who came to do a lecture at the prison. And during the course of the lecture, I had asked them, had anybody done a psychological evaluation of the biblical God character, because I couldn't find it. And they assured me that as far as they knew, one of them had like 35 years in psychiatry and psychology. One was a psychologist for over 45 years. The other one was a psychiatrist for over 40 years. And none of them had heard of anybody having the audacity to do a psychological profile. In the since it became known on this character from the Bible.
Now, with